All seasons. Okay, that was quick. Yeah, look at this street. Okay, this goes crazy. Wait, this is sick. This is sick. This is actually way better than I thought it was gonna be. I want to go in order of the seasons. By the way, I'm approaching this with the perspective of a DPS player. I haven't played any other role, specifically Rogue. Season 1 dungeons. Stonevault. I thought the trash in there was an appropriate amount of mechanics to where you could pull big, but not like stupid big. But the pull still felt like meaningful and quite dangerous. And it was fulfilling to like get by each pull. The bosses were uniquely hard. First, second, and third boss, Edna. And it was difficult. The twin dudes were kind of challenging because of the group damage that went out. And then Skarmorak. My experience with Skarmorak is probably a lot worse than most people, because the comp I played in that season was really bad at dealing with the Skarmorak totems. And also, yeah, I played Acid Rogue, and I couldn't kill the totems, right? So I needed to lean into my other DPS to kill them. But I didn't play like the meta comp that season. I wasn't playing with an Enhance. Enhance is phenomenal at killing them. I played with an Ellie. And Ellie is not so good. So that boss was really hard for us. It was also like it felt like a tank survival dungeon. So oftentimes I didn't really feel like I was the determining factor about whether we succeed that key. So maybe that's minus some points for like a key where I feel a little less important. Another downside for me was like, especially in the first area, there were a lot of visual bugs. Like the Sorleys from, I think, the Stone dudes would sometimes just not show up, and then you just lose the key for like reasons entirely out of your control. So that bug existing was like a big downgrade for me. But otherwise, I quite like this dungeon, I think. Like B or A, I'm thinking. I'm gonna put an A for now. I might come back to it. Again, as a DPS, I actually really like Stonevault. The pull size was quite good. As Assassination Rogue, I thought my damage profile was like really good in here. Skarmorak sucked, but the other bosses were fun. Last boss actually kind of sucked. As a melee. Maybe a low B. I'll keep an A for now. We'll come back to it. Ara-kara. So there are two Ara-karas. There's the Season 1 version and the Season 3 version. I don't really remember the Season 1 version compared to the Season 3 version, so I'm just going to think of the Season 3 one. Actually, I remember this at the very least. In Season 1, Ara-kara was like everyone's vault dungeon. It was fast, only 3 bosses, and it was also one of the highest keys that people pushed. I'm pretty sure. Let me confirm that. But in Season 3, it's like kind of really a lot harder. Or the timer seems a lot more rough. What were the highest keys timed that season? Yeah, so Ara-kara, one of the... one of the few keys that was timed on a 20. Was that a lot? Necrotic Wake, Dawn, Necrotic Wake, and Mist were the only ones. Alright, so it's one of 4 dungeons that were timed on 20. Anyways, I'll put in the easier half of dungeons. This season, Gambit, Ecodome. Gambit and Ecodome, by far the easiest dungeons. We see street, halls. Like, Ara-kara isn't even on here. I don't know what changed. Maybe Ara-kara stayed the same difficulty, and everything else that season was just, like, incredibly a lot more difficult. But, yeah, Season 1 Ara-kara, like, I guess difficulty-wise, night and day. I thought the trash in the first area was fine. Maybe the reliance on the poison dispel made things a little annoying. I mean, that season you were playing Og and Shaman, so it was like, maybe it was the comp that made it not a big deal. First boss would break pugs, they don't abate. Yeah. First boss was kind of annoying because, like, as Astro or really any DPS class, you want the ads to be on the boss, right? So you can still hit the boss and, like, deal with the ads that way. But if you were too close, then the boss would eat the ads and you would wipe on Avanox. So it was kind of kiss curse. Shadow stepping the suck on the last boss was kind of fun as Rogue. So I didn't actually have to do the mechanic the intended way, but it was a little annoying when my teammates would, like, outrange me and I wouldn't recognize until too late. I think there are, though, some better dungeons this tier. I liked it less than Stonevault. I will say it's Demon Hunter, though. Somebody brought this up earlier. Yeah, this dungeon banged on Demon Hunter. That is true. And I did play Demon Hunter. I'm gonna drop it B for now, though. I'm gonna come back to this. I need some more references to, like, kind of compare things against. Although I will say I do think I liked Stonevault better than Ara-kara. Bosses in Stonevault I like less. Why would I not like Ara-kara? I'm trying to like pinpoint why I don't like it. I guess I found the trash in the last area, like the mini boss ads that spawn those swirlies, is kind of annoying as a melee. Also, when paired with like the mobs that will root you if you run over top like the puddle, I thought that was kind of annoying. I mean, I'm just melee brain. I want to have 100% uptime all the time. So, and the last boss was like more of that. Watch your feet simulator. Maybe that's what I don't like about it. Just staring at my feet all the time. Oh yeah, the flying dudes could one-shot you. Okay, those kind of sucked. I think they were fine in the sense that if you're pulling them, okay, your entire team needs to press defensives. Like obviously because they're gonna jump. But after that initial jump, you can't really anticipate that 5 are gonna leap on you at once when they can choose from like any one of your 5 party members. So it's kind of suck. I don't know. Meh. Dawnbreaker, another season 1 dungeon, which is also brought back in season 3, so I can talk about it. So I really fucking like Dawnbreaker for multiple reasons. I love the hollow fall aesthetic. I think that shit is so cool. You know, the thematic really hits. I like that there's a mix of limited pace at the beginning of the dungeon where there's no variance in route. Everyone's doing the exact same thing. But on top of that, the pools are not like uncapped. So it gives classes that aren't Turbo Bis uncapped a chance to shine and like perform well in that situation. Just classes that have a damage profile that wouldn't otherwise be desirable because they're lacking in some way. Maybe their overall isn't as good. They don't do as good damage in cooldowns. Maybe they have good damage in cooldowns, but they don't have great damage outside of them. Dawnbreaker is nice because it was literally a great dungeon for all rogue specs for these reasons, right? Assassination was great because you could do the mini bosses and you were a Prio spec back in season 1. Also, you owned the second boss and the mini boss on the boat. Subtlety this season actually performed like very well. I think Dawnbreaker was Sub's best dungeon because of the thing I just mentioned where this starting section, you're restricted by like forced pulls and downtime between them, which gave Sub an advantage because it was a spec that had like really big bursts, but then low damage outside of that. So your damage was actually quite good and your cooldowns would line up well. And then Outlaw was also good in here because pull size wasn't insane, especially in the earlier parts of the dungeon. Like literally every rogue spec was good. And then I also liked, this might be a theme here, I quite liked how you could do whatever you wanted after leaving the first boss. You had an entire city of mobs you could go pull. I think that's really fucking cool. When they give us the freedom to explore and like mess around with different things. Now I will say, I don't like how it ended up being the solution on that fight this season to do a trash pack during the last boss because of an ability being like undertuned. That was kind of goofy. Kind of silly. And okay, well, I was gonna leave this till the end, but yeah, the biggest deterring factor for me in this dungeon were the bugs, bro. Even though like the boats in the starting area were fucked, and you guys might not know this, so because I competed in the MDI this season, right? The competing teams were told Dawnbreaker would not be in the dungeon pool because, and the reason we were given is that they couldn't preserve competitive integrity because of the way the bugs were, right? With pets despawning, your Resto Shaman's healing rain fucking disappearing. Ellie Shaman's putting Earthquake down and that just flying off the boat. Yeah, it was just so fried. Which sucks, because I really liked it. I mean, Rashanan also being bugged with the case of this season doesn't surprise me. That fight is kind of like really janky, is the way I kind of think of it or look at it. But I love the design of the place. It was great for every one of the specs I played. So for me, I feel like I want to put Dawnbreaker in like, I kind of want to put Dawnbreaker here for how I felt about it. I would have it in S if it wasn't for the plethora of bugs that exist. But I don't know, maybe I'll be convinced to drop it lower because of how cooked it was. No, now I think about it, bro, I can't do this. I'll put a B. The bugs in here were so bad. It brings it back down 2 levels. I kind of want to make like Dawnbreaker its own tier. I'm doing it. Add row below. Bugged. GG. Damn. God, this hurts me. Maybe I'll go back on this later. We're leaving there for now. Mists. So, Mists was like one of the other dungeons in season 1 that you could push quite high. I think a large part of that had to do with how broken Enhanced Shaman was on the first boss specifically. Like, teams were killing that boss way faster than intended because Enhanced Shaman existed. I think that's part of the reason it was super easy. Also, the maze section fucking sucked. I did not like it at all. It's cool in the sense that I guess the Dawnbreaker logic is right. Oh, you have some, you're forced to do a pull of like a very specific size, and that would like benefit classes that aren't just insane uncapped, right? Which is typically what ends up being meta. But that's not actually how it played out. How it played out is that you had your priest and evoker pull mobs through the wall, your shaman even, and so you'd have like these really big pulls, which I guess is like cool that people were able to figure that out. But in practice, I don't know, it just seemed like really goofy because after the first boss, my evoker missed the double hover tag over the wall. We're now like a minute slower, so that I didn't really love. I know I already talked about the first boss, but I guess it was like the damage and part of it was cool. The rest of the fight was like, I don't know, kind of meh. Kind of weird in the sense that half the fight you're taking 0 damage, and then after a certain timer passes, you just get fucking owned by the pulsing AoE. Second boss sucked. I did not like the second boss. Having to deal with the images and stuff was like not fun. And then the last boss I also didn't like. The indicators for stories on the ground were not great because the terrain was like a little hilly and bumpy, and depending on where the swirly would land, it would sometimes like disappear underneath the ground, or be like a lighter, it would appear translucent over top of the ground. So I don't know, Mist was kind of like, I didn't love Mist. Not a lot of freedom for what you would do. Maze section existed, which was really fucking annoying. Bosses were not great. It ended up being one of the easier dungeons you could push up, but I like throw it in C, maybe at most, maybe D. This was a dungeon though, where like, if you had a good in-hand shaman, like that would fucking be the difference. B tier because it was easy. I don't want to just put things in B and A tier because they're easy. I'm ranking this based on how much I liked the dungeon, or how good I thought it was. Oh, I also didn't mention this about Mists, but the whole thing where you had your priest had to babysit and mind control mob through the entire dungeon. Yeah, it was cool at first, but I got tired of it really quick, especially since our healer was like, he had his moments with it, so that part was less fun. Necrotic. So I did not like this dungeon. I think the trash pull you did at the start of the dungeon was probably the most fun. If we're like ranking this by how much fun are we having on the first pull of the dungeon, I think Necrotic Wake was like, as a DPS player, you just fucking ascended because you could pull so big. But yeah, it was literally a gimmick dungeon. More mind control shenanigans, MC the mobs that hook people, and drag it throughout the entire dungeon. Maybe this is true for other keys as well, but it felt like every mechanic just one-shot you if you got hit by anything. You know, stand swirly, cast goes off, you get hooked. Everything just fucking owned you. Yeah, I wonder if the perspective would be a little different from people that had like an easier time handling mind control. Like people that were more proficient at that, maybe they have a different perspective, but it was very unfun for me. Especially because like as a rogue, I played no part in that. So our success in the key was like entirely outside of my capacity, outside of my capabilities. This is what it felt like. Like my overall contributions maybe amounted to like 5% of what we needed to time the key. Just very, very inconsequential. Second boss also felt pretty bad. You had to kill the ads before the boss would like do his explosion thing. If any ads were up, it would kill everyone in the party. As Assassination Rogue, I had absolutely, again, no authority in whether or not we could kill those ads in time because I'm hitting off the boss no matter what. I mean, I would line up my cooldowns, I guess. And then having to like dodge all the shit on the ground, the beam from the boss, and then also hook the boss. That was annoying. The trash leading up to the third boss was like unfun. Mainly because the final A-bomb you would fight before the boss had an ability that would just like absolutely destroy you. And if you got unlucky, you were just dead. Because if it picked you multiple times, there's nothing you could do. And the boss itself, also kind of gimmicky. It was cool that like you could play around the damage amp of the spears. I remember they actually nerfed that, which I think was appropriate. Because I think the skill gap between the people that could play that boss correctly and those that couldn't was like really, really fucking huge when you could stack spears. And then they nerfed it, which I think reduced that skill gap, which was correct for like the most of the community, because that boss just felt so inaccessible for a lot of people. People that like didn't have a group that could proficiently deal with the cleaver, right? And then the last boss was so fucking annoying as well. You just get sent down on your cooldowns, you come back up, and you're having to play this game of like dancing around the platform while your Og and Priest and Shaman are like babysitting this cleaver ad to hook it at the exact correct time so that you could break the barrier. Bro, Necrotic Wake sucked, dude. This is going D. What do you think about Siege? Siege felt like a very lethal dungeon. I kind of like the trash. I say kind of because there was one mob type that would like randomly deal damage to you and there was no way to track it. Like there was no timer or week or anything you could use to identify when it was going to happen. So you just had to try and like guess and stun offset them. Usually it would work out, but if they then target the same person, like if you failed, they target the same person, that person was just dead. Or even at a high enough key level, and this is more of a consequence of probably being meta and their hero talents, because like they had the sort of spirit link totem effect as one of their hero talents where they'd share health with a random party member. If you get hit by like that random ass mechanic from one of the mobs, I don't remember what it does or what the name of the mob was, and then your tank also sucks your health, you would just die. I had that happen when I was progging like high siege, and it was just completely out of my control, so that one really was super annoying. Yeah, Tempered in Battle, that's what it's called. I did not like that one. Otherwise, I actually quite liked the trash. The trash felt pretty fun to do. The first boss was fucking amazing, especially as Assassination Rogue. It was like actually an Asa Rogue's wet dream. And probably if Havoc was meta then, it would have been a Havoc's wet dream as well. And then you would do a crazy pull onto the second boss, which I thought was cool as fuck. It was like mad insane difficulty, but really rewarding and big time save. The second boss was, I guess, fine. Going chronologically here. The trash after the second boss, that's the one part of, well, actually, probably one of two parts of the dungeon that I didn't like. I mean, it was fun. The damage profile for Assassination was really good because you had these big-ass giants and then all the little, like, Murloc dudes. They weren't even Murlocs, were they? Just some, like, random farters. You'd pull the monkeys. You'd pull a ton of the monkeys on, but the bananas were so fucking annoying. That's the one thing I didn't like about that. Because sometimes there were just so many mobs and so many nameplates on my screen, I literally couldn't see the ground. I would stand out a banana and I get stunned. That part I enjoyed less. More normal trash to the third boss. The third boss was like, okay, I don't know, nothing really crazy. Boss fine, whatever. Second thing about the key that I really didn't like was the last boss. I did not like the last boss in Siege. Going from like platform to platform, having to kill off these tentacles, survive the AoE hits and then the individual dots. Moving across platforms as a rogue just felt really bad. Like you could sometimes shadow step and it would put you on one side, and then shadow step would put you on a different side on a different tentacle. You had to be like really cautious about when you moved so that when you got the dispel, you wouldn't overlap with somebody else. Also, the timing that the dispel would go out, you had to wall before the projectile would launch because the damage was already set by the time it launched. So if you walled like once the projectile was about to arrive, you'd be too late, which was frustrating with Feint because when you're on the first platform in the last boss, you're close enough to the boss where the projectile's travel time will last, like it will be casted and then arrive at your character within 5 seconds. On the second platform, that would also happen, but it was really fucking close. So you gotta be like very precise with your feint pressing. And on that fight, Bigwigs / DBM spell queuing would actually show the wrong ability. So you just have to memorize the correct ability order to then wall at the accurate time, or you would just get one shot if you didn't have cloak. And also, if you played an all melee comp in there, like good fucking luck, bro. You are cooked. Oh my god. Being melee comp with that fight was awful because you just had nowhere to stand. Everyone's trying to be in melee. So there's good and bad in Siege for me. I would probably put Siege in like, I think I'd put in like B. Really didn't like the last boss. I hate the bananas from the monkeys in there. Those things cooked me. Everything else was fun. But the last boss definitely brings it down 1 rank, if not 2. Bananas are kind of like half a rank maybe. That leaves 2 more dungeons. We have Grim Batol and City of Threads is the last 2 dungeons. We'll talk about Grim. Okay. Yo, Grim Batol was fucking hard. Dude, this dungeon was brutal. Every pull felt like it would kill you. And your tank was probably the most in danger when doing these trash pulls, and also the second boss and the first boss. Your tank just got owned, always. That's a memory I had. Basically, by the time you got to the second boss area trash, as a DPS, I felt like I had to be very smart with my defensive usage or I would die. Well, a combination of that and also like CCing the mobs, right? Because if like a cast got off at the same time, you have those 3 caster packs and the 1 giant, if like 1 cast went off near when the giant would use its AoE, like you were just dead. I mean, had a high enough key level, you were probably dead to the bolt anyways. I feel like at the level I did it, you could barely survive, but... And then I would say in Grim Batol, like the difficulty would noticeably increase as a DPS player once you got past the second boss area. Like the section of trash with the Ascendant mobs, oh my god, those things were terrifying. Especially, at least when I was playing Assassination Rogue, every pull I had Deathmark. It was good, it was fun. But the pulls I didn't have Deathmark up, so basically every other pull we would do, oh my god, it was the sketchiest thing trying to survive. Because you were on a timer to kill it before the mob's AoE would kill you. It was also like a very high, like kick and stop dungeon, which is just kind of a theme this expansion. I don't know if I should punish it for that, because it did feel kind of impressive at times and maybe restricted pool size in some instances. But I don't know if I punish it for being very caster heavy. The third boss was goofy. You solved it with like a sort of what I would call a gimmick. And then the trash towards the end of the dungeon reminded me a lot of one of the other Cataclysm dungeons we've had in Throne of Tides. The ending of Grim Toll reminded me a lot of the ending of Throne of Tides with the way the damage profile was. And it was like fine, I guess. I don't know. It wasn't anything special. I think the last boss was cool. I like the last boss. Spawns adds, kill adds give you debuff, which makes damage you take harder. So there's incentive to either kill really fast or hold off DPS. The holding DPS kind of sucked. Pretty high damage that fight. I like the last boss. But yeah, that's basically it. I just remember this being like really fucking hard. That's kind of my impression. And I guess I enjoyed it, but more than I enjoyed it, I just remember thinking every time, like, man, if we time this, it's going to be a miracle. I'll toss it in like... I liked it more than Mists. I mean, Mists was infinitely easier, but I definitely like more than Mists. Toss and C. I think it's not entirely wrong to rank something based on difficulty either. And what I think was appropriate. I think Grim Toll was like maybe too difficult. All right, hot take. Hot take. I think I saw or some kind of poll. Maybe it was a Raider IO poll. City of Threads was like the least liked dungeon, I think, this entire expansion. I liked City of Threads. It just felt good to run. I don't know. I think the trash in the first area was kind of annoying. Like 1 or 2 huge mini boss mobs and a bunch of like little unimportant shitter ads that would die very fast. Like the mini boss mobs had so much health. By the way, I'm pretty sure City of Threads was one of the few keys this season where I'm pretty sure the best comp you could play was Assassination Rogue. Like Assassination Rogue was kind of in and out of the meta. I mean, it was like up there. So if you think of the meta comp, right, you had Prot Pally, Disc Priest, Og, Enhanced Shaman. Those 4 were locked in, okay? Your 5th was either Asa Rogue, Boomy, Frosty K. Frosty K was insane early on, but then they got nerfed. After the nerf, they were still played, okay? But Frosty K offered the worst DPS. But they also gave you the best survival, okay? Both individually, they could never die, and as a group, right? You got access to Anti-Magic Shell, immuning all kinds of abilities, AMZ for the group. So despite them doing less damage, a lot of groups still played DK because they just wanted like the reliance of living. So you had some groups that played DK. Then that left Boomy and Asterogues, which in my opinion were like the 2 most damaging specs. Boomkin, the most damaging and like uncapped AoE, just unconditionally. However, if you needed prio damage, okay, Asterogue owned. Asterogue was king. If there's ever any reason to do like prio damage, you brought Asterogue. And in City of Threads, this dungeon was like really, really good for that. You brought trash on the first boss, onto the... You couldn't do the second boss, but 2-target cleave was actually pretty decent damage profile for it. Third boss, you could bring trash onto the boss. Fourth boss, the fourth boss spawned trash that you could use as funnel. So Asterogue just cranked. The majority of pulls in there had some kind of high health mini boss mob that you had to whittle down. Asterogue loved that. So playing Asterogue, like this might be my own bias, but I actually quite like City of Threads. I think the trash in the beginning was like a little kind of weird. I've already said this, but the like 2 mini bosses with a bunch of little like shitter mobs, and then the shitter mobs would die insta. So you'd be left with these 2 high health chonkers that you had to whittle through because they were pretty dangerous before you could pull the boss. The RP before the second boss was like whatever. I know, it was just kind of a nothing burger. At high enough key levels, the last trash pack became a little sketchy, but you could map that out with like stops and stuff. Second boss I actually really liked. The duo boss, I thought it was a lot of fun. The trash leading up to the third boss the trash after the second boss was really fun. Super high target count. You could pull everything if you wanted. Slime boss was kind of not as good. I mean, it was fun as a rogue because you could like cloak and basically be the defensive person. You could immune the healing absorb right before the AoE, so your group wouldn't have to take it. So like that was fun. Right, that's what DK did really well in that fight. But obviously if you were playing rogue, you weren't playing DK. So I guess the responsibility for that fight was fun, although as a result of running around sucking up balls and stuff, I found I wasn't doing as much damage outside of the opener. And then the mini bosses before the last boss, I like kind of whatever. I don't really care. It's like fine, I guess. The last boss as rogue was so fucking fun. Oh my god, the level of like min-max that you could get out of playing that last boss was crazy. Okay, first of all, in order to live, You had to do some fucking crazy ass science with every single one of the AoEs, with the dot that would go out. Like, I had my defenses fully mapped out. Basically, just like the big damage events that would happen that fight would happen like once every 30 seconds, which meant, you know, there'd be 4 damage events over a 2-minute interval. And you had 2 big defensives, right? Cloak and Evasion on 2-minute cooldowns. So with that, a 30-second cooldown on your Crimson Vial, and 2 charges of a 15-second feint, you could like manipulate that in the best possible way to live that, and the dot that would go out every 30 seconds, which was actually crazy, like crazy damaging. So that fight felt super rewarding, playing my defenses correctly. And as Assassination Rogue, whenever like you have a single target boss and then mobs that get pulled onto that boss, namely mobs that like you actually want to keep alive to increase your damage, your movement, your globals, every fucking thing matters. And so that boss was so fun, like both from my own survival and like my damage optimization. There was so much min-max I could do, which I loved. But yeah, I say unpopular opinion, or I said unpopular opinion because this is like one of the least liked dungeons in 6-pack. But yeah, I really liked it. So I would throw it in like at least bottom of B tier. I'll settle for the compromise. Oh yeah, I'll put an A. I'll put an A. I could be nudge up to A. All right, season 1. Do I really think Stonevault is like one of the best dungeons this season? What the fuck? Man, there's no way I'm dying on Stonevault being up here. I think City of Threads is better than Stonevault. Do I think Stonevault is better than Ara-kara? Or City of Threads is better than Ara-kara? I definitely think City of Threads was better than Ara-kara. Do I think Stonevault was better than Ara-kara? I don't really have any like, I can't remember how I feel about Ara-kara because we got the re-release. The Ara-kara was brought back and now like my memory's clouded. Siege I liked. I hated the last boss, so I think this is fine. I could maybe do like this. Yeah, well, we'll stay with this for now. We'll come back to it if I want to later. All right, season 2. Okay, Rookery. This is the origin of the rock meme. I don't think I like the Rookery. Not just because of the last boss. It was a 3-boss dungeon, so it was quick. I do like quick dungeons, which you wouldn't probably think because I have some of the longest dungeons up top here. You couldn't really go too crazy with pulls in the Rookery because of how dangerous the mobs were. Like if you try to do some like a bird, one of the bird trash packs onto the boss, like that was just too much. You get owned. But the trash in the first area was like fine. I wouldn't say it was that bad. Actually, I'll give Rookery this credit. The first pull was like whatever, I guess. The trash pulls you do leading up to the first boss were actually pretty rewarding because they're like pretty difficult to live. Required like kick rotation. The damage going out was pretty high. And so like as utilizing my kit correctly and then also dealing damage correctly was like meaningful, enjoyable. I guess I enjoyed the pulls in the first area. But once we got past the first boss, I think everything from like that moment on, the rest of the dungeon was kind of beans. You do a trash pull after the first boss, which was fine. But after that pack, and you go down the hall, a lot of groups are skipping the hallway and then going into like that next big pull with typically, that would be your last. You had to pull 2 of the suck guys. That just felt so oppressive. And then as a melee, just like having to constantly be aware of the circles and like run out of them. And also run out if you had like this debuff, or if somebody else had the debuff, run away from them. Uptime felt really sketchy. Cloak was like necessary for that pull. It was just like, it was an unfun, difficult pull is the way I would think of that one. And then the second boss was I hated the second boss. Especially as a melee, you just have to run out every like 20 seconds. You can't pull trash onto it because the doors don't open until you kill the 2 suck guys. You could leave some mobs on the side, and that's what a lot of groups did, but they weren't like, it wasn't funnel in the typical sense. Like the mobs you brought in were actually kind of dangerous. And if you let their leaps go off during AoE overlaps, somebody would just get one banged. That was like the worst thing because you would pull like 1, maybe 2 mobs on the boss, and it's like, oh, it's just 1 mob, it's no big deal. You know, we're stopping all the leaps, but then the one that goes through is like during some event, or it's on somebody with a debuff, and they just get banged, and it's like, this 1 mob just fried my team. Yeah, DK went crazy in there. What was the comp? Oh, okay. Right. That season 2 was VDH, Disc Priest, Arcane Mage, Boomy, DK. I turbo played nothing close to the meta comp, bro. I played VDH, Arsham, Rogue, Ret Pally. Oh wait, we played Boomkin as well. All right, so we had two of the 5 of the Exodia. Rogue was actually like really good season 2, damage profile wise, but the problem with Rogue and the reason why it wasn't like meta in the sense that other groups also played it was because you filled the role as Prow damage, and then you were competing with Arcane Mage, and Arcane Mage just did more for your group. Arcane Mage did more single target, way more single target, and more Prio and like up to 5 targets, I think. But Asa-Rogue did a lot more uncapped, so it'd have higher overall. And if the pool was big enough, you had like the highest prio damage in the game. Asa-Rogue Season 2 was basically what what Havoc Demon Hunter is this season. And there were some dungeons you could play to that strength. Like I think Priory is a great example of a dungeon where Asa actually like owned more than Arcane Mage. But again, you lost because you were competing against Intellect for your healer and your Boomkin, Mass Barrier. And then I kind of had a debate about this with my team at the time. They were of the opinion that Arcane or Mage is just more tanky than Rogue. I think it's situational, but it was also true that if we subbed out the Mage for a Rogue, the comp looks fine, but we also didn't have a DK. So that additional AMS, AMZ value that these groups have, we didn't. So we were like extra squishy. So that was noticeable for us. But it was fun. I also do some cool shit with Paladin too, right? So anyway, so that was the comp. Another pro to the meta comp, and again, Arcane Mage, Boomy, and DK, they were all effectively on a 130 profile. So you could pull around 130. But as Rogue, if we try to copy and paste their comps, I wouldn't have my cooldowns up in a lot of situations. Actually, an exact situation in the Rookery was when the pull after the first boss, everyone pressed their cooldowns there. We would then like shroud to the less pull before the second boss, but I wouldn't have my death mark back. And that was like a big detriment. So that was a little unfortunate. Anyway, second boss sucked. The trash in the third boss area also sucked. I don't like trash pools where it's like one really big guy and then like a bunch of little teensy weensy baby mobs sprinkled around it. So you go into a pool and then the teensy weensy mobs die in like 2 seconds. And you're left just 1v1ing this big ass dude. Yeah, feet lickers. Oh, that's a great term. I hate feet lickers. That room was full of them, dude. But then the packs were like, those individual mobs were scary enough that you really didn't dare pull them together. So that pulling cadence felt weird. And then the last boss, I hated the last boss, bro. It was so awkward positioning, trying to be within range of your healer for the dispel if you were on one of the sides, and then also trying to drop your puddles in good spots so you could have uptime as a melee player. If you're ranged, bro, you were fucking payphoning. But as a melee, you're doing like these actual calculations, fucking mental gymnastics to try and drop your shit in the correct spot, be within range of your healer, and also run out of melee range to go stand on your rock, because if you don't pop that shit, you wipe the raid like I have. The damage jet was fun, especially because later in the fight, we would play around saving some of the little feet lickers and pulling them onto the boss during my damage jam, right, as Asa-Rogue. God, gave me a lot of fun. But bro, the stress from that and just the boss itself, not fun. So, yeah, Rookery is, for me, it felt like one of the worst dungeons one of the least enjoyable dungeons for me this season, but I'd probably put it definitely better than Necrotic Wake. Either low C or high D. I'll put a high D for now. Oh! Last boss sucked. Second last boss sucked. The first boss, there was some cool tech that we were exploring with, because the positioning of the trash mobs, some of them were like right towards the edges of the room. And so what I try to do in some groups, or what we would try to like route around, would be skipping some of these side, like the corner bird packs. So we could do fewer pulls before the first boss and then pull the first boss earlier. Or maybe even like pull these packs onto the boss. I don't exactly know how the routing went, but the idea was that we would skip some packs and then pull the boss. Certain classes, the abilities of only a select few classes would just pull everything in the room. Like if you had a shaman that was pressing chain lightning, and when they would go to the middle for the intermission, chain lightning would hit everything in the room. I think a DK as well. DK with like their disease spreading or something. Avenger's Shield might have been another example. I don't remember every single instance, but it wasn't every class that could do this. So there were comps that could play these routes, but not every comp could, because certain classes literally just couldn't use part of their kit if you try to route around this way. And that was super fucking jank. Don't like that. I spent a lot of time in Rookery. I had some passionate feelings about that one. All right, let's talk Priory. Season 2 Priory. I think we can also wrap Season 3 in there. Priory is like, I think everyone knows, is like the caster dungeon. Trash packs of like 3 or more caster mobs being very difficult to play around. Season 2 was also the season where everyone went left. In Season 3, everyone went right because they turbo buffed the Reflect Shield on the mini boss that everyone was playing in Season 2. By the way, whenever we did play that boss, or the mini boss, the Reflect mini boss, as Assassination Rogue with Caustic Spatter and Singular Focus going at the same time, I would lag everyone. You'd pull a couple trash packs onto the mini boss, plus like the 18 devotees that are worshipping in front of her, and you have a pack of like 25 mobs. Caustic is registering so many individual hits, plus with Singular Focus, those hits going back into the mini boss, plus with the Reflect Shield, all of those Singular Focus hits are going back into you. there was just like so many tens of thousands of instances of damage going out like every like 10 seconds or something, and you would literally lag everyone in your party. It was just fucked. But that pull was really fun as assassination route because I did hella damn. Oh my god, bro! I think the highest damage numbers I ever hit in season 2 were on the Lust Brawnpike pull we do. Specifically, you would just delete Brawnpike. It was so satisfying. But yeah, the thing of the bosses, first boss was kind of like fine, it's whatever. In season 3, we have the caster variant, so there was something we kind of had to pay more attention to. Now you had to like actually kick, whereas you don't have to do that in season 2. It's kind of like a tank boss in season 2. Second boss was like sort of annoying. This got fixed in season 3, but in season 2, the way the spell queue lined up is such that the boss would spawn the hammers and then instantly go into channeling his cast for the group soak. And as a melee, you'd have to run out to dodge the hammers and you just could not hit the boss. There was a way to play around it, but that spell queuing was like kind of annoying. But yeah, I think the trash pulls in there were like very difficult, but like pretty rewarding. I don't like the footmen sucked. Pop a DR at 50% health and then once every like 30 seconds. It seems infrequent, but when you're doing pulls of like 8 or 9 of them, that would like significantly slow down our dungeon. I really liked the paladin trash. Like those mobs were fucking scary, but it was like, that was a fun pull. Really big numbers and also like really, you had to play your defenses right or you were dead. Oh yeah, the light spawns suck, bro. Light spawns were unfun. And then having to move the mobs so that they don't get healed. It was kind of a cool idea. I think a cool gimmick. What it meant is that you actually wouldn't focus the beam guys down. You try to focus everything else because you didn't want to get healed. So the beam guys would just be beaming. Also because you wanted to kill them at the same time. So they would spawn the healing circle at the same time, but then just blow each other up. I would say I like Priory. Priory for me is a solid B at least. I think I like it more than Ara-kara. I think I like it more than Siege. It might be on the same level as these keys, but I'll leave it here for now. I like Priory. What's next? Floodgate? Floodgate, I quite liked. Floodgate was a fun dungeon. High pull count for the classes I played, that was fun. Let me think what I don't like in here. Being rooted whenever you had the spinny guys out was really unfun. Most groups would typically have a stop there, so that was like playable, but not always. Being rooted whenever the bomb dudes were out was unfun. The root just kind of really sucked, especially since the architects would just fucking chain fire that. I mean, it gave you incentive to deal with the scaffolding, so I get it. Those mobs were kind of annoying. Also, the Shredder mobs, dodging. I think this is probably a issue unique to playing Assassination. But you spend so much time staring at nameplates, monitoring your bleeds. I feel like you spend less time than the average melee DPS looking at your feet. And your feet was where a large part of the danger was whenever you had Shreddinators in the pool. Because they would spawn the saws in the ground, and if you didn't move smart, right, away from your own saw and other people's saw, you took too many ticks of damage, combined with some other random damage event, like you would just get cooked. What was annoying about that, I found playing Assassination, is that it would effectively punish me for trying to min-max my damage, because my attention is just directed somewhere else. Now, it is true that for like the global, or the moment that it happens, what I should be doing instead is look at my feet, solve the mechanic first, then go back to my damage profile. But that, not being able to like solve that, like kind of my peripheral vision while doing my damage rotation was a little frustrating, I think. I really didn't like on Demo Duo the hitbox of Bront. His charge, the hitbox like extends behind his character. So I've died multiple times DPSing behind him, and his charge just kills me. That was really, it's like the melee hitbox is really unclear. So that I didn't like, but I would say I quite liked everything else in there. Felt rewarding. The pulls felt challenging. Even outside of the pulls of the Shreddinator mobs, you did like really big pulls on Big Mama. I think Big Mama might have been tuned too aggressively. Big Mama was fucking just destroyed groups, man. I definitely like Floodgate. And I would say it is one of the better dungeons this X-Pack. Probably one of like the top 3. So, I also think the dungeon like thematic is kind of funny too. I don't know, the goblins that being in there and like running the shit is just, it's funny. It's entertaining to me. Definitely A tier. I don't know if it's breaking into S yet. I think there are dungeons that I like more than Floodgate. I would put it in front of Stonevault. I'll put it in front of City Threads. Season 2 dungeons. What do you have left? Cinderbrew? I'm going to throw this one on tier list and we'll talk about it. Okay. I love Cinderbrew. Bro, this dungeon is so fucking sick. Really big pull size, which was fun for the class I was playing at the time. Assassination Rogue uncapped, right? Also pride damage meaningful to kill the muscles in the first area. Could pull infinite trash on the first boss. That was a ton of fun. The mobs in there were like really, I don't know, unique and like fun. I think of the area going to the trash on the route to like Bang Busby. I really enjoyed that trash. You had the mobs that would do that line. It would do a chunk of damage to you, or you could like stop it, put it on somebody else. You could vanish it. You could like outrange it as if you were a ranged character. Chewy, oh my god, Chewy. Yo, Chewy was a chonky boy. Holy shit. That guy was living. Couple things I don't like about this dungeon. On the way to Ipa, the mobs that would... Two things. Okay, the mobs that would charge at your location and then, you know, bump into a wall and do a big AoE damage. Those are fine, but it was kind of stressful. One of the things that I would constantly be thinking about as a melee is I wanted to point that mob as close to the pack as possible, because especially as Assassination Rogue, all my damage is tied to one mob, and I don't want this mob leaving the pack. So if my teammate pointed that to fucking Narnia, my pull was over. So a lot of like my damage in that dungeon was dependent on how well my teammates played that key. And what was nice about being rogue is that you could also just stand on top of the mob with evasion, because as the hobgoblin charges, it's a moving hitbox, which if you encounter it will do damage to you, and then whenever it hits a wall, it'll do AoE damage to everyone. Okay, if you ever got hit with the movements and the wall, you were dead. Okay, there was no way you're living. But you could evasion, and then the first hit would be dodged. So that was like fun min-max. But what was frustrating with it is that you would do like the single hobgoblin with a bunch of scientists and the barrel spawns. The barrels are kind of the other thing I didn't like about this dungeon. Those things bricked so many of my keys, bro. We could never kill the barrels in time. I don't know why we sucked at it. Red Pelly, this is actually one of the benefits of Red Pelly. Red Paladin would own them whenever they had like their hammer up. I think they had that ability for like every other set of the barrels. But like Assassination Rogue, I wasn't doing any fucking damage to them, outside of cooldowns at least. And a big reason for that was because your bleeds on the barrels would not proc sudden demise. So even when you had if I put like a max comp point rupture on it, max grow on it, you wouldn't get the benefit of sudden demise, which was a fuck ton of damage. Like these barrels had maybe 20 million. Actually, I don't know how much health they had. Let's make it up. Let's say the barrel had like 20 million health and blew up in 10 seconds. The bleeds from your like grow and rupture would be like at least 5 mil, a quarter of this thing's health. That was damage that you literally just lost. So the only way you could do damage to those barrels as Assassination Rogue were through Caustic. Like that was your most efficient source of damage. Which sucked because basically whenever the barrel spawned, there was nothing you could do more damage to them. You just had to keep hitting the fucking mob you were hitting and let Caustic do its work. And then sometimes that wouldn't be enough. So like the comp we ran, there were some situations when that got hairy. You could line of sight them though. But the whole lining and running out of not being able to hit the mobs while you line them and, oh, oops, we stunned one. Now the barrels are off sync. Now we have to line at different times. You know, we fucked up. That part was not fun. So I didn't like the barrels. The charging mobs could be a little annoying. Ipa, especially when you'd pull trash on the boss, it was very volatile with like all the spells going out. But if you had a tank that was like really competent and a group that could like CC the ads well, as Assassination Rogue, your stocks were up, right? That's funnel for you. And then last boss, Bang Busby, was like fun. Also, I didn't talk about the B boss. Actually, that's not the last boss. The last boss was the CEO, whatever her name was. She was like, it was just a fun boss design. Bang Busby, I guess I enjoyed the fight, but, and this is, I guess, my final criticism of Cinderbrew, but that fight was so buggy, bro. Like, there would be instances when you would CC your B, like if you just use CC at the wrong time while you were doing stops in that fight, and I would fucking blind my friendly B that my healer got on, and my healer was then incapacitated, could not leave vehicle, so you were just dead. That was cooked. Sometimes when your healer, typically it was your healer, but whoever was assigned to like be on the bees and then send them into the barrels would shoot them, they wouldn't go, or they would die partway before getting there because like their health bar would still register taking damage events or something. It was just really cooked and it wasn't consistent. So that was like super unfun. And that fight being bugged is like, for me, of all the things I've talked about, what probably brings it from S to A tier. Bugs strike again. Not as bad as Dawnbreaker. But yeah, that charging mobs were a little weird. The Cinderbrew spawns were really difficult in my experience to deal with. Everything else, fucking amazing in there. Love that dungeon. I might be tempted to move it up later. We'll see. Season 2 dungeons. We have Mechagon, Motherlode, Darkfljame. That's it. There are 2 Halls of Atonements here. Mechagon kind of sucked. Second boss was super annoying, especially after they fixed the boxes to where you couldn't attack the boss anymore. Also, couldn't really pull trash on the boss either. Also, the dogs were like turbo bugged for a while, and there was a really weird way you could deal with them. And what would happen is these dogs would like jump and apply debuff that really hurt, and they could stack. So you couldn't pull too many of them. But what groups were doing is they'd pull like all the dogs in the room, and then the moment the first dog had their jump queued up, they would like root it. And then none of the other dogs would jump because they're waiting for that other dog that has its jump queued to execute its jump before they then jump. Because the dogs were like programmed to not all jump at the same time. They jump sequentially because the initial hit also does damage. But then that got fixed after not too long. Yeah, second boss weird. There's also like a lot of really weird shenanigans that went down. Lots of groups like doing crazy shit, like crazy out of bounds skips to get past the RP that follows the second boss. You had groups that were trying to combine pulls while like doing crazy snaps and like really weird shit. It was just super jank. Because whenever I was trying these things when I was pushing keys then, and you know our success rate wasn't the highest because we obviously hadn't practiced nearly as much as like MTITs were doing. It just felt degenerate. Like your success in that dungeon, it wasn't success in this typical way that you think of it of succeeding when you do Mythic Plus. You were like succeeding at breaking the game, which is like can be kind of fun in its own right, but it was the wrong game mode. You had to like also do the dodge the random citizens on the way to the third boss. Anytime there's anything like that shit just bro, what are we doing? I don't want to do that. Yo, if you guys have seen the Master's Terrace on the beta, they have a section just like that, but it's infinitely easier. I mean, they should take that shit out. I don't know. That's not fun. I don't enjoy that. At least from like a competitive setting, it's just really annoying. Somebody runs in there and gets ported back. Trash towards the end of the dungeon was like unfun. The last boss wasn't fun. Bro, the entire dungeon was just a stinker. I don't even... I think I would put it above Necrotic Wake. By the way, the third boss was one of the most difficult bosses of the season, but not in a good way. It was just watch your feet, the movie. I think I liked it more than Necrotic Wake because this was like, I would almost put this here, but it wasn't really like bugs. It was just the way the dungeon worked is like, it just felt, I was like a passenger in this key, so egregiously so, and the dungeon was bad. At least this dungeon I had some authority in like how things went down, but yeah, didn't like it. Motherlode. Motherlode was kind of weird. Do I have any meaningful thoughts on Motherlode? First boss was like a absolute snooze fest. Trash after the first boss was like the extractor mobs were kind of sketchy, but I'd say nothing too crazy. Mainly just on your tank. The mini boss that you would run into with like the rock dudes, also kind of sketchy. The AoE he would do that would stack haste. Some groups would skip that guy. Azarok was kind of tough. Not a whole lot going on, but it was like pretty intense. Trash after that guy was, you pulled pretty big. There were a bunch of these casters that had really slow casts. You just pull a bunch of them and like stop them. You didn't have enough kicks. Masterminds, these guys were sketchy. This boss was kind of boring. You would pull both of these war machines onto the boss. It's kind of weird. I mean, it worked because the boss didn't really do anything. There's quite a lot of damage to deal with, but like, I don't know. I didn't really look at this as being fun. If we're pulling trash into a boss, if you're just pulling one big mob into a boss, it's like, what are we doing? This entire section was annoying. I did not like these specialists, nor like these mines. I mean, this war machine's also just annoying. Also, I didn't like the last boss. Entire last section of the dungeon I didn't like. Motherlode, definitely better than all the dungeons down here. But I put it there. I'm getting C tier. It was one of the easier dungeons in the pool. Yeah, I think it's like the Mist of Tierlist Scythe effect for the Motherlode. Alright, Darkfljame Cleft. Last dungeon, season 2. I can keep this one pretty brief. I like this dungeon except for the section after the second boss. That entire segment until you went to the last boss is like, just so whack. The minecart where you had to walk through it with like candles, and it would sometimes move when you brought a candle and there was a mob in there, but it also sometimes wouldn't move, so it wasn't consistent. And then also your tank, after his third boss, Your tank would like, the way it ended up being solved was your tank would pull the fucking entire room while you guys just babysat the cart through. Which, I mean, when it worked was like nice, but sometimes tank I would play with would not live, and then it was not nice. I also don't understand why the cart RP existed. Like, what was the point of it? Because they made it so that it didn't matter how much damage you did to the boss past a certain threshold. Like, the boss would never go lower than 90% health, the last boss. Also, the trash at the end of the dungeon was more of an example of, what we call them? Feet lovers? I forget what they called. Like, a handful of high health mobs with a bunch of little unimportant mobs that died instantly. Feet lickers, not feet lovers, W. Oh, it was also weird, yeah, in that last room, like the snakes that you would pull, so you couldn't pull too many of them because they applied debuff to your tank that would just fuck your tank up. But there were a couple mobs in the room that didn't apply debuffs, but they were worth the same amount of count. I don't know why, but like that, I feel like that's something that went under Blizzard's nose that they should have caught. It was cool you could pull a bunch of trash on the last boss too if your tank was like a baller. But the first half of the dungeon was fun. The first boss, like the minecarts on that guy, I swear the hitbox on those things was like bigger than you would think. So I got punished a couple times with that. Acid Rogue cooked that boss though, holy shit. Yeah, I like Darkflame. I like it, but the card section is like, pulls it down severely for me. So I would put it B tier, for sure. I don't think I liked it more than Ara-kara, but I definitely liked it more than all the dungeons here. Alright, Season 3. Guys, let me introduce our first S tier dungeon. Echo Dome Aldani. Holy, what a fucking banger. What a fucking banger this dungeon was. Dude. My biggest gripe with the dungeon? Bro, the sand was too white. The sand was too white, dude. That was a mandatory inky black dungeon. I was blind if I didn't have inky blacks. Also, and I'll say, I think this probably isn't a fault of the dungeon, more so a fault of I think a lot of the groups that I played with and their interpretation of how to solve the mechanic. But on the first boss, you know when you get those circles, you drop them, and it creates this puddle where during the intermission, when the big worm man is sucking the ads in, it'll slow like any ads that go through the puddle down, right? I'm pretty sure like the entire season, everyone thought, yo, we need to drop the puddles on where the ads spawn so that it slows them. Okay, that makes sense. Except if you have any melee in your group, well, good luck. Now you can't hit the fucking ads. I tagged along with my friends for like a 20 Ecodome, I think. And the way they handled it was they're like, by the way, drop the puddles wherever you want. Just don't drop them in the path of the ads. And then they would just absolutely nuke them because they had uptime. I'm like, all right, I like that. The trash I thought was appropriately difficult. I think there were some mobs that were kind of annoying, like the lizard type mobs that would just port behind people and like charge in a line. They were kind of annoying, especially if you pulled a lot of them. The spears on second boss, I saw somebody else mention that. I think depending on the comp you had, that could feel pretty bad if you just didn't have damage for the spears, because they really started to truck at higher levels. But I feel like those are hardly meaningful grievances. Wait, that's true. Yeah, we didn't have... Where the fuck is Theater of Pain? Is that why there are 2 Halls of Atonement? Is one of them supposed to be Theater of Pain? I realized we did skip Theater of Pain. Let me do this. I would put Theater of Pain because there's no picture for it. Alright, W. There's no picture. Okay, so I think Theater of Pain was kind of a stinky dungeon. It was very linear. I typically don't... most of the time I don't like when you don't have a lot of freedom with like how you can pull things. I like a lot of these sort of more open-ended dungeons more. Not all the time. I mean, I have some linear dungeons up here, right? City of Threads is pretty linear. Stonevault is pretty linear. Cinderbrew. But in Theater of Pain, I think it worked poorly, especially because like there was an entire section where you just had mini bosses, like the PvP section. It was just mini boss after mini boss after mini boss, and nobody wants to do that, so everyone would skip as much as they could. And then there was like one trash pack in there of a pack of 5 mobs with 2 archers that was more dangerous than like most pulls you would do that season. Because those 2 archers were crazy, bro. Man, why even put it this low? No, you know what? I'm doing this differently. Theater of Pain goes here. Okay, so I actually think the dungeon itself was very like it was an unfun experience to the dungeon. But, and guys, this is a big but. You gotta listen up. I played Assassination Rogue this season, and Assassination Rogue fucking destroyed this key. Like, Assassination Rogue was the best DPS in here, not even fucking close. Maybe, okay. You can maybe make a case for Arcane Mage. They did probably similar amounts of prio, but they did less overall, so take it with a grain of salt. Assassination Rogue in here was phenomenal, and I played Ass Rogue. And this was like, I had rank 1 damage in Theater of Pain multiple times because this key was just so good for my spec. For me, it would go like, it's either here or it's here. I have really fond memories playing Assassination here. I think there's like a pretty high degree of like min-max you could do playing that spec, so I really liked it, but... Let's talk about Halls. How did Theater of Pain get up here? I like Halls. I don't love the feet licker mobs after the first boss, after Halkias, leap on you and slow you, and at 5 stacks you can't move, and also just absolutely owns your shit. Those guys are kind of unfun. That's like a non-issue if you have a movement break. I never remember to save Vanish there. And as Demon Hunter, I didn't have any way to deal with it. You couldn't Vengeful Retreat out of it. You could meta out of it, or like you could move with your meta, but you couldn't like drop the debuffs. The RNG to that, based on whether or not they like picked you to jump on over somebody else, that felt kind of bad, but it was hardly I would die to it, so I don't know. At most it was just kind of frustrating because like as a melee DPS, it would maybe affect my uptime. I really liked the trash in the first section of the dungeon. I think the shards were pretty fun to play around. You also had archers to contend with. The archers were like less fun based on the damage profiles that went out. Like if any shot went off during something else, like during the shards, so you were probably cooked. I mean, that you would just wall and usually you could live through it. So I didn't feel like it was overly punishing. Second boss was like, okay, I don't know. Second boss was kind of sort of annoying. I didn't like the way the stone mechanic worked, where when you get the debuff, you had to go run and stay on top of the ads, get stunned, get knocked back, get a heavy fucking debuff. It was cool. You could outplay it. You could like immune it with Cloak, or if you had a priest in your group that could grip you out, you could do that. That was pretty sick. The Eviscerators after that boss, another example of mobs I don't like, similar to the mobs from Siege that I was describing earlier, because there's no way to track their damage event, I don't think. And it just goes on a random person, and if you get picked twice, or at the same time as a shot, you have no way of anticipating it, and you will die. The bosses in Halls just felt so long. So the third and fourth boss specifically. I mean, Halls was fine. I don't know. I don't really have any strong opinions or feelings towards Halls. I can't think of anything in there that was like overly, incredibly frustrating, or things I really didn't like, apart from the Eviscerators, but you really only had, with the way routing was, you only really dealt with them for like one pull. I'll put Halls in B. Do I like it more than Darkfljame Cleft? Yes. Maybe I like Halls more than Ara. You know, Halls actually, I think Halls gets goes above Siege as well, because there's nothing offensive in here. I quite liked Siege, but I hated the last boss. So yeah, Halls pretty inoffensive. I don't know. No strong opinions in here. It's kind of a whatever dungeon. I think the main point of difficulty for Halls was like reacting to and surviving through the whenever the archer mobs would pick you. I don't love that kind of difficulty curve, like difficulty enforced by mobs that target you with abilities and reacting to that, where you can't just like kick it or stop it consistently, I think is a little less fun. Because I think that sucked about Demon Hunter. Actually, here's a really good example. In Halls, was you would just always press your Chaos Nova on cooldown for damage. But that also meant, you know, in addition to your meta, the mobs were constantly stun DR. And so there are times when you're being casted on and you're in danger, right? Maybe it's in the middle of a Shard of Halkias pull. You want to stop the mob, so you go to use your single target stun. Oh, nice try, bucko. It's stun DR. Stun doesn't go off and you die. Now you could track stun DRs, but I haven't found an elegant way to track them in the Worth-In, so I just chose not to. But that meant that was just always a possibility, which was annoying. I want to put Theater of Pain on the list now that we actually have it as dungeon. So it's definitely better than all these dungeons. I think it goes somewhere in the C tier. I'll put it here for now. I think I'm going to actually move the C tier around. Let me finish the rest of the Season 3 dungeons. Tazavesh. Gambit and Streets. So Gambit is like the free dungeon this season. It's what Mist / Ara-kara was Season 1. It's what Darkfljame Cleft was Season 2. Actually, I'll get rid of this one. So this does in fact have all the dungeons. So W. Gambit, I hate mobs that flee, bro. The Murlocs running away when they get to low health in a incredibly congested area, in my opinion, it was unfun to play around that. Which is funny because I actually quite like Brackenhide, and the first area is very similar with the humanoid mods that run away. But I think what made Gambit's fleeing mobs especially egregious was the fact that some of the mobs would put a banner down that healed all the other mobs, and you'd have these fleeing mobs getting healed by a banner that you had to prio. So you had to prioritize killing this banner as opposed to killing the fleeing mobs that would then run off into another pack. You didn't group them back in or have some kind of slow root, stun, etc. mapped out for them. And it was especially annoying because the mobs that you were having to slow and deal with weren't necessarily the mobs that were like the high health important mobs in the pool. They were the feet licker mobs. Okay, they were like the little small Murlocs that they have absolutely zero impact on the timer, but you still had to control them to a certain extent, or they'd pull extra and you'd be in trouble. But fun first pull, typically. I didn't like the Guardian ads before the first boss. And I mean, being a melee, right? We pulled 4 Guardians into the boss and you just had no uptime. That was less fun, but necessary to time the highest keys. The trash after the first boss was fine. It was pretty dangerous, but at least the mobs that do random damage to people, there was a way you could track it with your weak aura. So you could anticipate when the damage is going to come out. Unlike what was the case in Siege, unlike what was the case in Halls, right? With the Eviscerators. That was an improvement. The second boss was like, honestly, entirely group diff. It could be the easiest fight of all time if you had a group that know how to position well, and the hardest boss of all time. on the same vein, the hardest boss of all time if you had a group that didn't know how to position well, and all the ads are running at you. I didn't like in Gambit how the last boss was super long either. The last boss took so long. Now, groups found ways to like pull trash on the boss and make it so that you could pull the boss earlier and then play trash over the course of the fight. But yeah, it was still just like really long and uneventful for the most part. I feel similar to Gambit as I do Halls. I think it goes in the B tier. I don't think I especially like it quite like I like these A tier dungeons. It's kind of interesting. I'm sort of tempted to do this. And we have 2 ends of the spectrum where you have Priory, which I think is a really fun dungeon, but really fucking hard. And Gambit, which is also fun, but really easy. Complete opposites here. Relative difficulty. I think I like Halls more than Gambit, though. Do I like Gambit more than Siege? Wait, no, honestly, no. I think I like Siege more. I also think I like Ara-kara more. I'll put it here. And then we have Streets. 5-boss dungeon. Probably one of the dungeons where there's like what felt like the least amount of trash. Most routes had like the same mobs, and there wasn't much variance. Like each trash pull you would do. Like if you'd go down the zoo section, you'd fight the 2 I almost called them corn hogs. Dude, holy fuck. You fight the 2 core hounds with like the mini boss. It's a 3-target pull that's like 11% or something. Absurd. So you were doing these what felt like kind of small counterintuitive pulls after the first boss, but it just ended up being the most efficient thing to do. I would say the trash in the first area and like playing trash on the mini boss was quite difficult because of the lines mini bosses would spawn and having to do kick rotations. Especially when my group played in the MDI, we'd have 2 casters on that pack on the mini boss. So there was like mandatory melee kicks to survive that pull. But what I've seen other groups adjust to is taking that 1 extra caster pack and moving it onto the boss and then just playing multiple casters on the boss, but like sequentially, so you don't play them all at once. I feel like that's a lot smarter and a lot more reliable way to deal with it. So I think my impression of that pull maybe is more difficult because my group made it more difficult, or my team made it more difficult than it necessarily was actually difficult. I will say though, first boss, the meta revolving around immuning the jail and having tools to deal with that kind of sucked. I was not a fan of being a class that wasn't a mage or a DK that couldn't immune every single one. So if you got unlucky and were picked multiple times, like eventually you're going to have to deal with the jail cell. And most often that meant just dying and eating a B-res. So that kind of sucked. I didn't like the second boss. Typically we would go to the Mechanical Menagerie? That fight was really awkward because the balls were like that would spawn for the second boss in the Menagerie were like lethal unless you had that buff. It was fun when you could get like line up the buff with your cooldowns, but you were just kind of like, I don't know, I was like running around hitting the boss maybe half the time. Felt kind of bad. I didn't like how one of the most popular mobs you played, the Peacekeepers, were mobs that just did random damage. Okay, I don't like the random damage to a single person type mobs. I think that's something I've noticed. Well, at least it was predictable again. Got to give it 1 up over the mobs that you can't anticipate this damage because you could track it. What other bosses were there? Mailbox, kind of whatever. It was fun pulling crazy amounts of trash on the boss. That was cool. Didn't like the RP section at the market, and I didn't like the theater boss. Last boss, also kind of annoying, having to follow the boss through the ports. It was pretty cool, like, using logic to deduce what ports you should go to like, dodge the circle or navigate to the boss whenever he starts doing that long kick cast. I also liked how on the last boss, you could kind of cheese the boss's bleed that it applies. If your entire group would take the portal, the boss itself would like kind of be line of sighted and it couldn't get its cast off. So that's kind of cool. Although speaking of cheese, bro, I wish they didn't just dismantle, like misdirect snapping. Because there were some really cool opportunities to snap mobs in different areas of the dungeon that my MDI team was exploring. In particular, onto the last boss, but we found it wasn't consistent. We would snap them up and then they would snap back down after a short amount of time. So I don't know what they changed, but like compared to Algathar, where you could snap mobs like almost anywhere. I mean, that was part of the meta in that dungeon, involved like snapping a bunch of mobs to the like the bird platform, right? If you played back in Dragonflight. Unfortunately, there was none of that. And playing a spec where I have 1 hour tricks, that would have been fun to like utilize. But I mean, if it was in the game, it would also probably not be a good thing, because that would probably be something specific to Rogue, to where like other classes wouldn't have that same allowance for routing. But I mean, Rogue wasn't very good this season, so you could have given us something, you know. Anyways, I've been yapping about Streets. I would put Streets was like kind of, yeah, I agree with Yev. There's not much of anything in Streets. It feels like you're just one boss after another. The trash itself is like doesn't feel super rewarding to get through. It did end up being one of the easier dungeons this season, funny enough, because the timer is so lenient, despite being a 5-boss dungeon. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't love it. I would probably put it in like top of C. Okay, so looking at this list, is there anything I want to change? And I already know the answer to that. The answer is yes. And I think it will allow me to make some additional changes within the list. I think, so Ecodome is definitely S tier. I kind of want to give it some company. And I think I'm going to do that. For me, Ecodome is still like, I think it is by far and away my favorite dungeon. I kind of want to leave it on its own row for that reason, but I'm going to add Cinderbrew and Floodgate here. Cinderbrew would healthily join it on S, okay? Healthy, if it wasn't bugged, or if the Bank Busby wasn't as like janky as it has been. But I think I still enjoy it enough to where I would include it. And then Floodgate is just a solid dungeon. Now, City of Threads is staying in A. I would put City of Threads in S. I would do it, but I'm not gonna, because I don't like the trash in the first part of the dungeon, and I don't like the I Spy section. But I can probably add some dungeons to A now. I could bump up Priory and Halls, maybe? Something like this. Yeah, I'm thinking about Stonevault. I do like the way this dungeon kind of played out. But it's also at the same time, I don't know, there's nothing that, if I'm going along the train of thought that there's nothing really remarkable in Hall's Atonement, then I mean, it's kind of similar for Stonevault. I think a part of my bias here just has to do with Rogue being really good in this dungeon, Asa Rogue being really good here, and Hall's happened in a season where Rogue wasn't very good. Yeah, I think that's okay. Okay, C2 needs some rearranging. I didn't like Mists though, dude. I really didn't like Mists. I was gonna move Mists up, but I'm like, I don't like Mists. I don't really like Motherlode. I guess I would move Theater. Would I move Theater of Pain up? I really like Theater of Pain, but this is the heaviest class bias of all of the dungeons so far, because Assassination Rogue was really good in here. I mean, the PvP wing just actually stunk super doggo doo-doo. But I'm just trying to think, if I had to choose to do one key of all these 5, what am I choosing? Not based on how easy the key is. And I don't know. This might be it, guys. This might be the list. Dude, I'm so sad about Dawnbreaker. It could have been up here, man. Oh, dude, they did it. They really did it to the Donnie B.